Putting this video together has genuinely made me giddy with excitement for next season. We're talking about Zubimendi, Martin Ødegaard, Victor Gyökeres, and how I think they can all really help each other's game, and how I think Ødegaard in particular is going to be ignited by the arrival of these two players. Now, Victor Gyökeres has not yet arrived at Arsenal Football Club. We've not had the here we go yet. I am still very confident it happens. And obviously, if it doesn't, this video will age incredibly badly. But before we get into it, if I could just ask you to please like and subscribe. If you're new and haven't subscribed, we're on the way to 22,000 subscribers. 22 for Ethan Waneri's new number. So please do help me get there. And other than that, we will get into it. And we're going to start here. We're going to start with Zubimendi. This is the first part of the formula that I can see carrying Arsenal to trophies next season. I'm going to say it. I'm giddy. I'm excited. Now, there was an article that came out yesterday in The Athletic. I thoroughly recommend going and reading it, but it was basically about Martin Zubimendi and why the headline stats don't necessarily demonstrate how impactful he is on games. And they looked at some other stats that aren't necessarily reflected in those headline stats. And it got me excited and it made me see the vision, right? So this is Zubimendi breaking lines all over the pitch from his midfield role. And it's relative to all La Liga midfielders last season. Now, if you actually look at the full list, I've shortened it to make it more clear for you to see. If you look at the full list, right, the entire top 10 is made of Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Real Betis players, other than Martin Zubimendi. All three of those teams, of course, top 6 teams in La Liga last season, where Real Sociedad finished 11th. And so, first things first, I think you do clearly benefit from being in a team that dominates possession, dominates the ball, which Sociedad weren't as capable of doing last season. And yet, Martin Zubimendi still managed to come second on that list of midfielders for breaking lines in total. And then when you break it down into first, second, and last opposition defensive lines, Zubimendi is second for breaking the first line. So breaking the first line is breaking effectively the attacking line of your opposition. He is also second for breaking the second line, which is the sort of midfield line, getting in between the midfield and the defense of the opposition. And then he is also joint second for breaking that last opposition line. But the two big ones for me are those first and second opposition lines. And if we break that down into where he's actually breaking them down, you can see a lot of the time it's from a sort of central centre-back position almost. And we'll show pictures of that illustrate it. But he loves being in and around the centre circle and then either going left or right. Doesn't often go directly through the middle. But I think if you particularly look at breaking that second line, which is something we struggle more with, right? Breaking down those mid blocks. That's where we often find ourselves circulating the ball back across the defence again and again and again. Where Zubimendi breaks them, he often goes wide left, wide right, obviously, because that's easier to do. So plenty of those balls going out to the left wing, right back. But there's a significant number of them that go into that kind of area that Martin Ødegaard should be operating in. So he picks the ball up often in the centre circle, central centre back, and they go into that little pocket where we would like to see Martin Ødegaard. Now, far too often, I actually think we've seen Ødegaard dropping a little bit too deep because he's had to try and pick the ball up and start moving it. But if we, again, look at that visually here, you can see the sort of position that Zubimendi likes to occupy. Now, this is for Spain, and you can see Dean Huijsen well ahead of Zubimendi here. And when Dean Huijsen carries the ball forward, which, of course, Gabriel can do, Zubimendi drops off into this pocket to receive the ball. And if he was to receive the ball here and now in this position, you can see there's then a very quick pass into the number 21, which I think is Marino off the top of my head. But there's a very easy quick pass on there. That's not what happens. Actually, Huijsen carries it for a while longer. He passes to Gyökeres. And then eventually, it comes back to Zubimendi here. Now, Zubimendi's highlighted. And one of the things that he is great at is retaining possession of the ball. The way he uses his body under pressure is fantastic. And you can see here, he's under pressure from Cristiano Ronaldo as he receives the ball. And the way that he shapes and shields it, it looks almost as if he's going to probably receive it and then play it either back to the goalkeeper or come out down towards the centre-back, possibly even the right-back. But he actually doesn't. In this situation, he actually doesn't. What he does is he feints to do that, and then he takes the ball with his left foot and drives forward. And that white dotted line you can see is where he ends up carrying the ball all the way into that red square. That's not normally what he would do, but it is something he's capable of, which I think is very good. But in relation, actually, then to where we could see him picking out Martin Ødegaard in particular through that second line, this was an example we saw when Spain played against France. And again, he's picking the ball up almost as a central centre-back in the centre circle. And this one ball that he picks out Mikel Merino with, which ultimately ends up in a goal, is fantastic. And the way that he splits both the first and second line here, he's taken 6 French players out the game with one ball into Merino. And I think the longer we go with doing this, and we'll see it through pre-season hopefully, the more that Martin Ødegaard can trust himself and trust Zubimendi that he can stand in these pockets and receive the ball rather than dropping deeper, the more we're going to be able to break down these mid-blocks. And, you know, as an example, right, I think normally the way that we played, particularly last season, I think you'd see Ødegaard in this position kind of being where the ball is. In this picture, where the ball is between the first and second line, I think Ødegaard comes in here to collect it, right? I think we can be braver. We can trust Martin Zubimendi. Now, he is going to lose the ball at times. No player is perfect or faultless, right? But those are the sorts of risks I think you can afford to take, and at times you do need to take to break teams down. So I think we can come to the conclusion that Martin Zubimendi is going to allow us to progress the ball far more quickly and pick out Ødegaard in more advanced positions. So now we move on to Martin Ødegaard. Now, last season, I think we all agree, he underperformed, right? Relative to what we know of Martin Ødegaard, he picked up a big injury earlier in the season. I don't think he fully recovered from it. I don't think his confidence fully recovered from it. He never seemed as comfortable on the ball. And I think for a lot of people, there is genuine doubt in Martin Ødegaard now. And I think he has to prove those people wrong. Now, I believe we will see him back to his best next season. And, you know, you look at some of the stats. This is from the season before, right? This is 23-24. Ødegaard arguably at his best. Ødegaard created at least 13 more chances from open play than any other player in Europe's top 7 leagues in 23-24. That is incredible. 88 open play chances from Martin Ødegaard that season. The closest to him was Bruno Fernandes at 75. That's like 20% extra on every creative midfielder in Europe's top 7 leagues. That is a stat that I think is underrated. Now, the question is, he dropped off in 24-25. Can he re-find that form? I believe he can. And you can actually look at what he's done for Norway in World Cup qualifying this season, more recently, where he's registered more assists than any other player in World Cup qualifying in Europe so far. And I do think, as much as he definitely dropped off last season for various reasons, like we mentioned with the injury, I do think you've also got to factor in, he lost Bukayo Saka for a big chunk of the season. He lost a striker for a big chunk of the season. Like, you know, is Mikel Merino making the sorts of runs that a striker needs to be making to help a creative midfielder? He made some of them, but he probably didn't make as much as even a Kai Havertz does. So I do think there are things that you have to factor in, and you put him behind Erling Haaland again, and suddenly he's getting the most assists in World Cup qualifying so far. But if you go and look into stats as to what those chances are, and this is where I'm linking up Zubimendi into Ødegaard and then into Victor Gyökeres, you won't be able to probably see this quite clearly, but what you can see from this graph is through ball specialists in the top 5 leagues. And this is last season. So this is even in a down season for Martin Ødegaard. The horizontal axis across the bottom is through ball frequency. How often are they playing through balls? And the vertical axis going upwards is chance creation via live passes. So open play chance creation. So ultimately what this graph is showing you is open play chance creators with through balls that specialize in through balls. And even in an off season for Martin Ødegaard, he is right up there in the top right of this graph, high volume through passes and chance creators. And you look at the names that are on that list with him, you know, you are talking about top chance creators. And again, that was in an off season without the best attacking players in front of him. So can he replicate that? Absolutely he can. And so then you move on to, you're comfortable that Zubimendi is going to be able to find Martin Ødegaard in these spaces. You're comfortable that when Ødegaard has the ball, he is capable of creating plausibly more chances than any other player in Europe with through balls. And so that takes you to the third piece of the puzzle, Victor Gyökeres. And one stat that I think is remarkable about Victor Gyökeres is this: profiling power forwards. Now, again, you won't be able to see necessarily the dots themselves, but along the horizontal axis here, you've got runs in behind per match. How many times per game are they making a run in behind? And on the vertical axis, you've got peak sprint velocity. What does that mean? It means the speed at which they reach their peak velocity, the speed at which they get up to top speed, if that makes sense. Now, on this graph, the light green is players in Liga Portugal. The dark green is Premier League players. So this is factoring in Premier League players with it. And if we zoom in on Victor Gyökeres, he is the furthest right, and he is significantly high up the graph, which puts him in quick peak speed, runs in behind often. So he makes the most runs of any player in Europe, or any player between Liga Portugal and the Premier League. And he's very, very quick at getting up to his top speed. And what I think this does is firstly demonstrate that Martin Ødegaard, who plays as many through balls as anyone in Europe and creates chances via through balls, now has the striker who makes runs for those through balls more than any other player in the Liga Portugal and in the Premier League. And what I also think it does, and this is where you kind of need to watch Victor Gyökeres, I think it dispels probably one of the worst bits of analysis of Victor Gyökeres. And that is the idea that Victor Gyökeres needs acres of space to run into. That in Liga Portugal, there is so much space in behind, and that is why he scores so many goals. Because actually, that's not the case. Actually, if he has loads of space that he has to run into, that doesn't put him at the biggest advantage because his top speed is not that quick. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but he's not a rapid centre forward. But he gets to his top speed quickly. And so actually, the longer distance he has to cover, the more chance there is for a defender to catch up with him. He actually benefits just as much, if not more, over shorter runs in behind. And we see that in some of the goals that he has scored in the Liga Portugal. So this is one of them as a great example, right? Now, you can imagine either Martin Ødegaard or Bukayo Saka picking the ball up in this position and a little ball through like that. There's not acres in behind here by any stretch of the imagination. It's a little deft ball over the top. It's a chipped one, so the ball is in the air here. Victor Gyökeres at this point is being man-marked, but he gets away from his defender. First time finish on the volley into the far corner. There is no reason that that cannot be replicated at Arsenal. And in actual fact, Martin Ødegaard will supply balls like that better than any player that Gyökeres has played with previously, because that's what he does. We can look at another example here, right? You can barely see Gyökeres here. He's in the circle, being completely man-marked, being held onto from behind, and a little deft through ball here. Again, how often do we see? This probably is the best example of a position we see Martin Ødegaard in all the time. And he plays those little dinked balls through or a little outside of the football through. We see it all the time, right? And again, this isn't running into acres of space, but he gets up to speed so quickly and he makes those runs so often that he generates chances for himself. And again, it's a first-time finish. How often would we see Ødegaard play a through ball like that, and whether it is Havertz or Trossard or Gabriel Jesus or Martinelli, they're taking a touch. They're taking a touch, and they may well not score. Victor Gyökeres, first time, bang, because he's a gunman. This is what he does. And the volume of the runs that he makes in behind, you imagine, right? If you make one run in behind in a game, your defender that's marking you, one time in the game has to be switched on to read your run, and they have to make the right decision as to whether to let you go or go with you. If you do that 20 times in a game, you are making your defender make the decision whether to go with you or not 20 times, and you are forcing the defender to be switched on to your run 20 times. And even if they are switched on, you're getting to your peak sprint speed quicker than they are. And so you combine all of these three things, and this is where I am genuinely giddy. You combine the fact that with Martin Zubimendi, you are going to be able to get the ball to Martin Ødegaard as much as we ever have done before. And crucially, you're going to be able to get the ball to him in more attacking spaces. And once the ball gets to Martin Ødegaard, you have the one of, if not the best chance creator with through balls in Europe, feeding it into someone that is one of the best players in Europe right now to make a run in behind, receive a through ball and score it. I just think as one singular pattern of play, by the way, this doesn't even include when you're talking about Bukayo Saka, when you're talking about Kai Havertz or Martinelli or Eze if he comes in. We're talking here about just three individual players. But I genuinely think all of them are massively going to benefit from the relationships that they have with each other. And so for me, that is a formula that will massively help us break down those mid blocks. You know, those games, the Fulhams, the Villas, the Newcastles, where we just feel like it's stodgy and we recycle the ball again and again and again. I feel like this is going to come in massively for us. Now, like I said, we need Victor Gyökeres to arrive, right? We need Ødegaard back to his best. Zubimendi needs to settle into the Premier League. You know, we saw with Mikel Merino when he arrived, felt like he was at times maybe half a second off the pace. Zubimendi's got the full preseason. He needs to be up to pace. But I see this. I see the vision, and I'm excited by it. So I hope that, I don't know, I hope that makes you excited, I guess. What was the purpose of the video? One of them was to get rid of that analysis about Victor Gyökeres, that he needs loads of space to run into, because I don't think it's true. One of them is that I think Martin Ødegaard will cement himself as one of the best creative midfielders in Europe next season again. And other than that, I'm just excited. So look, if you enjoyed the video, please do like, please do subscribe if you've not done already. We will be live later today, depending on when you're watching this. We go live every day as much as we can. We're waiting patiently for the Victor Gyökeres. Here we go. And other than that, as I'm recording this, it's a Friday afternoon. We're hitting the weekend. I hope you enjoy it. And again, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. And until then, goodbye.